Well. Good morning, Cerberus. How are you folks out there today? It is a beautiful day here in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. I'm enjoying the preparations of a massive ice storm coming my way. You've got Gregory Junkbond Carpenter here. On the line with us is Suzanne Sherman, being the super lead host gal that she is. She's waiting to let me do the introduction today. And our super producer, Jeff, the man with 26 hands, Johnson. Jeff's doing everything for us behind the scenes, and every once in a while he'll pop in and give you some wisdom of his own. Today is a special day. We're planning on having Jeff. I just got a note from Booger. Says please send it, if you could send it to him in a text. That would be great. We're planning on having. Oh, there he is. Our buddy. Isn't that amazing how technology works like that? We have our buddy Booger from somewhere in the hinterlands of nowhere land. Booger, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you doing today, Gregory?
I'm doing extremely well. We just got booted up here. We're ready to go. So we have a show and a half. Suzanne, off to you for that legal disclaimer stuff.
Good morning, listeners. Good morning, producer Jeff Johnson. Good morning, co-host Junkbond. Good morning, co-host Booger. Wow, we have 2 hours of live radio excellence in store for all of you today. I want to thank all the listeners we had yesterday. Jeff and I were talking before the show. And I think we need to list the train.
Booger, you're going to have to mute, please. That train coming through.
I'm sorry about that.
Shoot
I
that
am
train.
in the basement even today. God.
The train just keeps a rolling.
We need to. We should have our intro, that Aerosmith song. Train kept rolling.
Let me get this on. Hold on.
All right.
Well, we are Cerberus.
That's your wonderful intro that always seems to get interrupted.
We are the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend freedom and liberty from the train of tyranny.
Oh, great. Now it's a train. How are you going to stop that thing? We need something like Godzilla, the Godzilla of liberty.
It is the 19th of February, year of our Lord 2019. If you can't listen live, you can follow us on our radio co-loop. You can listen to our shows 24/7 on our app there. We have the spy who loves liberty, Greg Junkbond. His Liberty Minutes are outstanding stuff you will not hear elsewhere. Oh my goodness. The Wasatch Report, our Wake Up Cerberus morning show. Case in point, where I discuss certain landmarks, judicial temple monkey opinions. Fundamentals of federalism. That's easy for you to say, not me. And let's see, we have the Mark and Suzanne show, Revolutionizing Radio. My goodness, I needed to get up earlier this morning. And let's see, the Paradigm Shift and the Baylor Report, as well as some of the stuff from Mike Maharry, Shift Gold, and lots of fun stuff for you. Follow us on SoundCloud. Hit that bell on YouTube. Subscribe, follow, share with your friends. Again, welcome to all the new listeners. And where should we start? You know, Junkbond, yesterday, Booger was with Jeff and me, and we were talking about the National Emergency Act and this whole thing about the wall. And just a quick reminder, you know, we started having these little budgetary issues. Remember, Trump signed reluctantly the budget omnibus saying, I'm not going to do this again, but we've got to fund the military, but I'm not going to sign another disaster like this. The second opportunity comes up for him to veto, and he signs it saying, I'm going to keep the government open. And then let's see, I've kind of broken this into 5 steps where he wants now in step 3, $5 billion. We're going to shut the government back down. We get a disaster of a bill that's 1,100 pages or more long. He signs it. And what I'm hearing so far is there's language in this bill preventing the building of a wall. And
so you got to build it so you can know what's in the bill.
you got to build the wall before you can see it, I guess. So what he's doing now is, rather than shutting the government back down, see, in the contract world, if you put forth an offer and it's rejected, then you just back off and say, okay, now we have nothing. So what he said we're going to do is, if I don't get that $5 billion at the end of 3 weeks, I'm going to shut the government down. Well, that's not what happened. And now it looks like this new deal is going to allow for some form of DACA or amnesty. And then we have now a national emergency where he's going to go around Congress and build this wall anyway. And conservatives are cheering and taking their victory laps. But these are the same people that were absolutely indignant when Obama made his end runs around Congress. So here we are, both sides chanting for their version of big government and screaming when they don't get their way, celebrating when they do, with absolutely no big picture here of what's going to happen when, not if, their side loses control of the government. What's going to be the next national emergency? Jeff, you've been engaged in quite a few debates on this, and we're going to talk about this subject a little bit more because we didn't really get to finish yesterday. And then we've got a lot of really interesting stuff. We're going to talk about that raid in Houston where 4 police officers were shot. What else is going on? And Booger's going to weigh in and share some amazing stories about the drug war south of our border. Jeff, what did you had some thoughts that you wanted to share from this whole National Emergency Act and the constitutional and even practical justification for this wall? Both sides we were talking about yesterday.
Well, the first thing that has been really, really out there is that everyone is using the National Emergency Act of 1976 as a justification to say, what? It's constitutional. See, they passed the law. But when you confront these folks with the idea that, okay, cite the article and section where there is a delegated power by the states to the general government to declare national emergencies, or in this case, they delegated an authority to the president that wasn't even in the Constitution. So in Article 2, and I go, okay, go to Article 2. Show me where the president has national emergency declaratory powers. He can declare an emergency and act without the legislative body addressing the issue. It's not there.
Jeff?
Don't bother looking. You're wasting your time. It's not there. The president was never given a national emergency power. So can Congress amend the Constitution by an act? This is pivotal. This is the problem. This is the thing I've been arguing on Facebook till I'm blue in the face. Can they, with an act, amend the Constitution? Well, in a lot of these so-called conservatives' minds, yes, they can. They can do whatever. And so I finally end up posting that if you believe that there's implied powers that they can do this, there's no written constitution, and they are now free to do whatever they want. And what do we always call the Constitution, Suzanne? A dead letter. It is dead. The Constitution's dead. They can do whatever they want, and they'll use whatever means, whether it's amending the Constitution by an act of Congress, or it's an amendment to the Constitution by 9 politically connected lawyers in black dresses. And that's where we're at. They have unlimited powers because they say they do. And what's interesting about it, I keep saying, okay, well, you keep saying go back to the Constitution. Well, 4 years after the Constitution was ratified, Washington is sending troops into Pennsylvania to put down a tax protest, which is pretty amazing, considering that there was a protest in Boston Harbor at one time. Here we have our King George channeling their King George just a few short years after the end of our revolution to get away from the unfair taxation. It's just pretty amazing.
Amazing, too, that the rebellion and the desire for freedom from a tyrannical government is where we have our origins. Yet now the government, which eventually resulted therefrom, has put King George was a piker. Parliamentary sovereignty, that was nothing compared to, I would say the system we have now is even worse than parliamentary sovereignty, because under the system of parliamentary sovereignty in England, it was legal because there was no written constitution. So we have a written constitution and it's being disregarded. So which system is worse? I'd submit to you the latter. We also see so many examples of miseducation, particularly when we have these people getting educated in the university of Facebook memes, I like to call it. And you see one of these that goes around all the time that says the Second Amendment was because the founders created a nation, and they liberated a nation. And no, we had 13 sovereign independent nations. They were called states, and that was the definition of state at the time. They didn't liberate a nation. They declared their independence. Then they formed a limited union called the Articles of Confederation. It's almost like they forget we had this time without a centralized government. And then to get around the success actually of the government under the Articles, because let's face it, this disunited union was able to defeat the strongest military force. Somehow we weren't legit until 1787.
Didn't we, hold on,
1789?
Didn't we just form a hunting lodge for rich white guys?
Right.
That's why we got the Second Amendment, is for hunting rifles only. It's not to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government, like Patrick Henry said. He must have misspoke when he quoted himself.
And we see this all the time, the pundits and all the celebrities. Oh, the Second Amendment is my carry permit. We've got this debacle of national reciprocity being debated. And, the problem is, and I've mentioned this before, is all the time the media turns to law professors for their commentary. What have I said time and time again? If you want to go to the worst source you possibly can to understand the Constitution, go to a law professor in particular, because they are the ones guilty of indoctrinating future lawyers and legislators into the false notion of the Constitution. Again, there's a difference between constitutional history, which accurately, depending on the historian you go to, because there are a lot of hacks out there. So
they actually created the environment that people believe is the reality now.
And you have this for whatever reason notion that these people have credibility because they teach in a law school. It doesn't take a lot to teach in a law school. I was having this discussion with another recovering attorney who's also a historian, Kevin Gutzman, who says, you can just do well in first-year torts and then clerk for a federal judge, and then all of a sudden you have this pedigree that'll get you as a professorship at a law school or get you a seat on a federal bench. It doesn't take a lot to get there. And here, let me share with you, I was talking about this article on a page called legalinsurrection.com, where they go to Harvard law professor Jack Goldsmith. And here's how he's describing, it's just a couple short paragraphs. I'm going to get into that and then get into his analysis. But he's saying that Trump's actions have been breeding with the claims that he's sparking a constitutional crisis or threatening the rule of law. And considering just the substance of what he has done, these are large exaggerations. There's a lot of noise on this line. Somebody needs to, if we're not talking, whoever talking should mute their mic. Everything Trump proposes to do purports to be grounded in congressional statutes, and much of what he claims to do does not rely on emergency power. So here again, we have a law school professor with the pedigree of Harvard by his name, relying on congressional statutes. And as Jeff very adequately and appropriately said, statutes are not constitutional authority. They're just Congress taking a power they were not delegated, that they decided they want to have, making a law and using that law to justify further actions. We saw this with Scalia defending the federal government's actions in California in Raich versus Gonzalez, where he used the unconstitutional Controlled Substances Act to support the Department of the DEAs of drug enforcement agencies action in circumventing California's medical marijuana law. So what this guy says is Trump's claim of emergency power, nor is his claim of emergency power outlandish, at least by, and here we go again, when we use past unconstitutional behavior to justify the continuation thereof. He says power is not outlandish, at least by the standards of past presidential practice. This is the executive version of stare decisis. He goes on to explain that many charge that Trump is declaring an emergency when there is no emergency, but this begs all the relevant questions. The relevant statute on which Trump relies does not define the term emergency. Presidents have always, really always had discretion to decide if there's an emergency, and presidents have often declared emergencies under circumstances short of necessity to address a problem that does not rise to an emergency as defined in common parlance to mean a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. This is absolutely insane. Here we have somebody that should know better, a Harvard law professor, justifying a blatantly unlawful expansion of the authority, the powers delegated to the president under Article 2. They even acknowledge that this unlawful delegation from Congress is now a justification for this action when it is completely vague. It leaves to the president's sole discretion what constitutes an emergency. There's no threat to the rule of law that this article claims. To the contrary, Trump is utilizing powers Congress expressly gave to the president in the way they intended. Maybe you think it's bad policy for Congress, but here we go. Another law professor, Professor Josh Blackman, points out Congress cannot claim that the president is subverting the rule of law when it gives him the precise authority he needs to accomplish this goal. Well, we also have the National Firearms Act. That's blatantly unconstitutional pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, where the power to regulate firearms other than arming the militia was never delegated. The Second Amendment merely reiterates that. But under this rhetoric, and I bet these people are anti-gun control, we have a federal statute being relied upon to justify federal action. Again, these people all get it wrong. He said there's no constitutional crisis, there's no dictatorship, there's no monarchy. Get a grip. To this author, I say no. How about you get an education? The constitutional crisis really took place in 1787 when the delegates arrived in Philadelphia under one premise, and then the Madison, Randolph said, hey, we got a better idea. And Jeff, who was it? John Lansing and Robert Yates said, we were not sent here to do this. We're going back. Told New York Governor Clinton, this ain't right. We were never authorized to walk away from the articles. Patrick Henry, I smell a rat. He was right. I say it all the time. What he smelled was a big, fat, stinking sewer rat, indigenous to Washington, D.C., that spread its ugly plague across this continental landmass. That's your constitutional crisis, ladies and gentlemen. And it's not just here. And I'm also sick and tired of seeing that Obama claims that Obama destroyed this union. No. Obama never destroyed the nation, ladies and gentlemen. We can go back to the Constitution itself. And that really bothers a lot of people because a lot of people think that this is on a par with the 10 Commandments. No, it ain't.
Suzanne.
I'm going to breathe now. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so it's folks, so we have an internal chat amongst the hosts here, which is kind of cool. We go back and forth and tell Booger, mute that thing again, doggone it. And then other times we can say, gosh, I'm going to go con to your argument, Jeff. Now, that was 15 minutes ago. You've been listening to the Suzanne Sherman show for the last 15 minutes and getting a good historical aspect of what happened to the Constitution and why it went south for the winter and hasn't come back north yet.
Give a lawyer a microphone and an audience, even a little one, and we're off to the races. In fact, back when I was co-hosting or substituting for Mark Kreslins with his son Trent, apparently he was trying to call in and get on his own show, and
she's off. Look at you,
Mark.
See that poor Mark? He can't even get on his own show. Now you see. So this is what happened. So what we're going to do in the future, I think, is we'll give you like a little 5-minute like Jiffy Pop timer, and every 5 minutes it'll give you a reminder that you're still going. So I want to go back just 1 second here to the presidential declaration of emergencies and all this other stuff. I submit to you, Suzanne, and to Jeffrey, the one who brought up the argument in the first place, is that any discussion about a national emergency is already dead, because we've been living under Proclamation 7463, which was extracted, gosh, what is it now, 18 years ago. Trump decided he kept it going. He gave himself the authorization to keep the states in a temporary state of emergency and report to Congress every 6 months on how that's going because of 9/11. We have not left a state of emergency since 9/11. Bush signed it. This is Bush's bill. Obama kept it in effect, and Trump reauthorized it for himself. There's like no reviewing this now. You're still in a state of emergency. So everything that we're talking about here, essentially, because they've given themselves this power, I think is irrelevant. They can do anything they want in this situation. There's no limitations to what the president can or can't do in this state of emergency as it stands under Proclamation 7463. It's very broad, and it gives sweeping powers to the president, and pretty much, and that's why when you hear presidents say that, like Obama, like, well, if Congress isn't going to act, I am, that's because he's got the authorization to do that directly in almost any situation he wanted to when he was president. There was nothing that restricted him. 50 U.S. Code 1601 is the National Emergencies Act passed by Congress, and it includes statutes in Section 123, 123A, 527, 2201C, and 12066. There is a whole bunch of this that's already been written into law that was given from Congress to the president to do whatever they want, and I don't see anybody making this end anytime soon.
No, it's too convenient for them, isn't it? I mean, how many times do we act under the auspices of an emergency? We had the unconstitutional delegation of power for the War Powers Act. We have the opioid crisis. How are they going to expound upon, that? What are we going to see now? We hear opioid crisis, healthcare crisis. Is that an emergency where all of a sudden we had to get the ACA? All of a sudden we have to do this. By the way, if this is truly a national emergency, why have we waited 2 years within the administration? He was aware of this problem before, and it seems like both parties take their spin on immigration and create a national emergency. Remember when under the Trump or the Obama administration, DHS was actually picking them up at the border and dispersing them all around different places under the promise that they're going to appear in court? No, they were seeding future Democrat voters while at the same time federal courts are striking down voter ID laws. So this is what seems to me disingenuous by calling these caravans an invasion. What is the military definition of an invasion? Is this a political invasion or is this a military one? Is there a difference?
I can I get in here?
Yeah, please.
Mike in the chat asked a question a while ago, and I've been wanting to get back to his question. Hopefully he's still in the chat. So what do you think will stop the flood of illegal immigrants coming across the border that can be accomplished now? Mike, here's the
force.
Here's the thing. If you want a wall, yeah, well, that's true, Greg. If you want a wall, then it must be done constitutionally. Pass the legislation authorizing the spending of the funds to build the wall, and the president signed it into law. Other than that, every other way is unconstitutional. If you want a National Emergency Act, it's unconstitutional. If you want whatever it is, the fact of the matter is, it really is going to come down to who is in charge of immigration, and that is the states. The federal government is only in charge of naturalization. Read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and you'll find that. The states, if Texas, wants this flood to stop, they can put their troops on the wall or on the border and end it now. If Arizona wants to stop it, they can put their militia, National Guard, whatever, on the border and stop it now. Same with New Mexico, same with California. If
that's a good point,
California wants them in, then they can come in. But then every other state needs to pass a law in their state saying that no benefits will be paid to people that come into their state illegally from California or any other place. And then if you end the financial magnet, they will stop coming here in these numbers. I'm done with my thing with this for now.
No, that's a good point, because you really have a situation where you're actually identifying what the Constitution allowed the feds to do and the powers that are reserved for the states. You're calling out exactly what the states should be doing. Short of an amendment to the Constitution, there's no authority for the feds to do anything further than what you just said. Go ahead, Suzanne.
No, and I was going to refer people again to the article I wrote for the 10th Amendment Center, the Constitutional Solution to Immigration. The problem that we have here is very early on, like we alluded to, that the system of government that was proposed and outright rejected in Philadelphia, didn't even make it to debate for the delegates at the state ratification conventions, was rejected, where we had a strong central government, the states being subservient or subsidiaries there too. So again, when you guys talk about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, thank you very much, that provides them with the power to have a uniform rule of naturalization. People love to grasp at straws and say, yeah, but you have to immigrate before you can become naturalized. So, we even have so-called conservatives embracing the Hamiltonian, Lincolnian version of this United State of America. You can't be conservative and make that claim unless you finally understand. And this is why, the other day I actually got a telephone survey, if I could digress for just a moment. And they said, how do you identify yourself politically? Conservative, liberal, or independent? And I said, you know what? Conservative has no meaning. So I don't know. I can't answer that question for you. I can't say just conservative or liberal, because conservative and liberal, which liberal is really progressive, which is really Marxism, let's just call it for what it is, are oftentimes on the same side. And that makes the conservatives very angry when you say that. But you try and tell them that there's something wrong with the drug war. Oh boy, howdy, you damn commie.
You don't understand the danger that we're facing.
And I'm not a huge fan of Madison, but what I quoted in this article in the Federalist 39, and again, this this is a good way of examining the mindset of the different arguments at the time. In Madison 39, he really did say that this act of establishing the Constitution was not a national, but a federal act. And that's him conceding the point that he lost. He proposed a national government, and that again was rejected. So he conceded that fact and said this is a federal act. And people say, well, what's the difference? I'll tell you the difference. In a federalist system, we have a central government with limited powers and adequate resources, not unending, not $22 trillion budgets annually, not a deficit that our progeny forever will be unable to spend, but adequate resources to fulfill its limited delegated powers. That's it. So what does this mean in terms of immigration? It means the authority to determine citizenship in the Union as a whole is going to rest with this general government, but the power to control immigration remains with the states. Today, and this is where we've gone off the rails, the federal nature of the American system of government has really been dismantled. That was before the ink was dry on the holy parchment, and the states are now secondary. This is a complete inversion of the government to which the states consented. So again, this has been through a deliberate misinterpretation of the Constitution. As expected, this misinterpretation consistently results in expansion with the scope of the national government. So how can we fix this? First of all, we've got to get government out of the welfare business. And people say, stop giving it to the illegals. You know what? Stop giving it to everybody. Because if you have a blanket policy, it is not the role of the government to be charitable. We're going to stop taxing you serfs as much as we are, so you people can find it in your hearts to choose whom and what causes you wish to support and make a meaningful contribution to those. Good luck with that. Ain't going to happen. So when we have all these federal welfare programs, anybody can come in here through the border, and these benefits follow them wherever they go on this continental landmass, wherever they may wander. So there's no financial incentive if California wishes to have the policy of an open border, take their National Guard off the border, as I believe Gavin Newsom has done. They must be fiscally responsible for their decisions and not count on federal funding for the people that they allow to come in.
But there's no backlash for that if they're not fiscally responsible.
And there isn't. And that's the thing. Do you remember when they had the crisis with the dams in California? Well, we just don't have the money to maintain this infrastructure. It's an emergency. We need help from the feds. This is like your teenage son saying, you know, I spent all my job money on pot, women, and booze, or the rest I wasted. And I have no money for car insurance or gas so I can get to work. Mom, Dad, can you help me out? No, be responsible for your poor decision making.
Yep. Go call Geico, get that 15% off.
Exactly. Right? And so the states aren't forced to be fiscally responsible for their policies. If they were,
well, neither are the feds.
And neither are the feds, quite honestly. Yeah. You're absolutely right. What do we take home from this? I don't think this is fixable. The government allows anybody who crosses the border illegally to collect benefits. There's a financial reward to those who are breaking our laws. What other country gives you financial incentive to break the law, unless you're law enforcement and civil asset forfeiture? But I digress.
So we're a little upside down. Let me just jump in for a second, because we look at things and we say, okay, well, you know what? The states messed this up. The states did this. The states did that. But we never say, oh, the feds did it. It's their fault. We never hold that level of standard to the feds in the same manner as the states. We always say that, oh, the states are so corrupt. But when the Fed shows itself to be corrupt in the same manner, we just overlook that. We let that pass. We don't seriously hold them accountable in any way that we'd like to consider we hold the states accountable. And I think that's one of the major flaws that we're looking at here, because we'll say that, oh my God, you know what? These guys in this state did this or this. They must be, backwoods hicks because they suck at XYZ. They're so stupid and, they're so corrupt. But the Fed will get caught doing the same thing. And we have no words of admonishment for them. We have no correction for their behavior. We get a little bit of lip service from Congress when they say, oh, we're going to keep an eye on, let's just pick an easy target like the FBI or the NSA. We're going to keep a close eye on them from now on. Don't you worry about that. And what happens? The same damn thing happens again. I'll give example A. Let's talk about the CIA just for a second here. You talk about oversight. You want to have oversight? It's not going to happen right now because back when President Carter declared a national emergency because of the Iranian hostage crisis, we are still under that national emergency executive order. Do you realize that, folks? That thing is still active. What is this, 37 years now? 38 years?
On yesterday's show, I think I went through 38 national emergencies that are still in effect. Sudan, many, I think everyone was overseas. A national emergency, call me crazy, and a lot of people do. You're crazy. This is my thought. You be quiet. My thought on a national emergency. A national emergency should be of such a nature that it impacts all of us or such a significant part of the population. We all know somebody, even like these massive hurricanes. Was it ever understood that the general government would step in when we had a weather caused calamity? Was FEMA ever imagined? This was really for the states to take care of on their own. And again, if we're not taxed to death, the people from the other states can contribute to these funds.
Think about the Great Fire of Chicago. Who rescued the people from the Great Fire of Chicago? It was the wealthy. It was those are the people that stepped up and reinvested in Chicago and took it from its knees back up to making it one of the greatest trade cities that there is today within 3 months. How long did it take FEMA to get one non-asbestos filled freaking trailer down to New Orleans? I can't even tell you how long. It probably still don't have one down there that doesn't have asbestos in it.
Well, and look at the communities. They're still devastated down there. And, and I've had friends that have gone to, I think it was Missouri or Oklahoma. Some friends of mine from a church mission went to go help after one of these devastating tornadoes. And Red Cross made it actually more difficult for them to provide assistance. And then Red Cross says, well, you have to have food provided from our certified kitchens. How do you get certification from Red Cross? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm betting it involves an exchange of money from you who seeks to help to Red Cross before you can get their seal of approval. I saw another small community that was being assisted privately by an organization. I think it was a Vietnamese community after the Houston flood, the big hurricane down there. And in trots in this little Vietnamese social justice warrior. They had to pluck one out that had the same, racial background as the community where these people were trying to help, making accusations that the people were afraid because I think it was a white motorcycle club that came in. We're hearing complaints of racism here. And the community was saying, are you out of your mind? These people are helping us. Where's the Red Cross? There's no government agency here. And you're going to come in here and stir the pot and call these people going out of their way to help us racists? And they handed this lady her you-know-what in a hat. And they said, how dare you? She said, well, I heard there was people saw a Confederate flag. I mean, they had to reach for the unholy satanic cloth, the stars and bars, and say these people were scared. No, these people were getting fed, but you can't stand it because you are merely a branch of the Democrat Party, the government party. and are trying to cause discourse. So only the people that can come, only the people can provide relief have to have the brand of S on their food. And by that I mean socialism.
Who was that? Who was that? That ad hoc Navy group down
Yeah,
in New Orleans, right?
Cajun
They got their
SEAL.
lunch handed to them.
Yeah, the Cajun SEALs, I think they were called. Here's
Right.
the thing too. Yesterday, I was talking about Mayor Villarosa in Los Angeles. We have the people that come here illegally, and how they get preferential treatment. This goes back to what we were saying about the magnets. You know, not only do they come here, but they get preferential treatment under the auspices of fairness and equality. Well, we have this thing called equal protection, and you know, everybody wants equality. What does that mean? People similarly situated must be treated the same under the law. Well, in California, if you are caught driving without a driver's license, or one that has been suspended, your car will be impounded. What did Villarosa say in Los Angeles? Well, if these people are here illegally, they're undocumented, they don't have a license, we're going to tell the LAPD to stop impounding the vehicles because these people need to get to work. That's not.
That's equal rejection under the law.
Yeah. So sorry, Whitey. If or even the Hispanics that are here illegally, apparently, they will have their cars impounded. So we have preferential treatment for those that have decided to break the law. And again, whether or not you decide these laws are constitutional, federal immigration laws are not. Again, they are legal. There's a difference between legal and constitutional. So in the Lincolnian America, which is what we're not thriving under today, I should say suffering under today, these laws are perfectly acceptable. Here's another example. In Charlotte, Democrats want police officers to cut back on DUI enforcement in illegal immigrant neighborhoods. We hear all the time what a national crisis drunk driving is, and if we can just save one life. Well, again, I've said this before, we have a hierarchy of our social justice victims, and the victims of drunk driving accidents are lower on our social justice totem pole than are the illegals who want to drive illegally. But they say here the Democrats on the Charlotte, North Carolina City Council have asked the police department to cut back on enforcement of drunk driving laws in neighborhoods with large illegal immigrant populations because the immigrants are apparently nervous to see the cops. We start with pressure on Charlotte police to cut illegal immigrants with a break when it comes to speeding and drunk driving. Democrats on city council are asking cops to cut back on traffic checkpoints and drunk driving enforcement in neighborhoods where illegals live. The reason, it makes them nervous to see the cops. At the Charlotte City Council meeting, the CMPD asked the city to approve of a routine grant of enforcement of traffic checkpoints. And the council member, Braxton Winton, a Democrat, grilled the deputy chief, asking him why they carried out drunk driving enforcement last week in the area while immigration and customs enforcements were conducting a raid in the same area. What we're going to see here is an increase. And again, I am not a supporter of sobriety checkpoints and that thing, but again, favoring or telling them to back off of one community because of a certain contingency, a certain group in that area, that is not equal protection under the law. This is preferential treatment. So when we start seeing an increase, or maybe someone gets mowed over, we're going to see a family. Let's throw some kids into there that are going to get mowed down by a drunk driver. Then what's going to happen? What are we going to see? City of Charlotte gets sued because family was killed by drunk driver because they failed to enforce these laws. This is what happens when you have too many laws, preferential treatment, selective enforcement. And we're going to see a lot more of this, but I just thought that was interesting in light of what we were saying yesterday.
It is kind of interesting. Isn't Charlotte? No, I think there's something else happened in Charlotte not that long ago. There's some other type of racial inequality engagement that happened there. I can't remember what it was, but
well, wasn't that the big? They said it was or maybe that was Charlottesville Remember where that woman got run over by a car, and that was a big thing. There's just been a lot of crap.
Oh, the whole setup. Yeah, the whole setup thing. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, Charlottesville. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically so this is amazing to me. Now I'm not a big fan of the what do you call it, the sobriety checkpoints. I don't think there's any realistic legal backbone to saying that this is completely constitutional, because I don't think it is constitutional in any way. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, lawyer lady, but holy cow, how can they just stop you with no probable cause for anything? Just pull everybody over and say, okay, you know what? Everybody's got to go through this sobriety checkpoint.
Well,
I don't see how you can do that.
in my constitutional law class, aptly called con law, because that's what it is. It's a con. I remember hearing about that. And we had a very libertarian-minded classmate in there, and he was objecting to this policy. And our professor just smiled and said, the Supreme Court has ruled that these are okay, provided there's no profiling and it's uniform. Meaning, if they violate everybody's rights that comes through, then it's okay. Now, going back, silly me, I like to play this little Constitution as ratified game. What are the 3 crimes the federal government was authorized to punish? And there, accordingly, the Supreme Court would have jurisdiction over which to opine. Well, piracy on the high seas. I've said we've had the Coast Guard and civil asset forfeiture and this unlawful drug war. I think we're the pirates. Counterfeiting, if our fiat currency isn't the biggest counterfeiting scheme around,
when you legalize something like that, I mean, how can you say that it's a crime anymore? How would you ever want to prosecute anybody under that? You'd have 90% of the really rich people in the states going to jail.
Right. Yeah. We can print money, but serfs, don't you think you can print it? Only we can print our version of fiat currency. And then the other crime is treason. Well, right. I was asked one year when I was volunteering at the Patriot camp out here in Utah, a kid asked me, has anybody famous ever committed treason? And I said, well, this will explain my last appearance at Patriot camp. And I said, well, according to the Constitution, treason is defined as waging war upon the states.
Right.
Now, when the Southern states seceded, Lincoln was of the opinion that they never left the Union. They were merely in rebellion by waging war against them. Yes, I will tell you who has committed treason, and that was Abraham Lincoln. This mom in the back, you could see the steam coming out of her ears, but she never wanted to question me or ask me about that.
Mine idol Lincoln. What are you saying about Lincoln?
Oh my gosh. So anyway, I also told these kids, because they start off their Patriot camp by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And I told them why I do not say the Pledge of Allegiance. I was never asked back there, but fortunately, I hope I planted some seeds that will maybe germinate.
We got a great Liberty Minutes about the Pledge of Allegiance in Francis Bellamy. So you might want to tune that in. Yeah.
There's nothing patriotic about the pledge. And people will say, well, I pledge for the republic for which it stands. Well, you're also buying into the words of a socialist. And this is, I did mention your article yesterday, Greg. And, it was interesting to me, the angle I was not prepared, or I was uninformed about, was that it was really propaganda to promote the sale of flags, the proceeds,
right,
which benefited who?
Francis Bellamy.
And the socialist movement.
Oh, the socialist movement. Yeah. In Massachusetts.
There you go. Booger's been quiet back there. Does he want to contribute at all? And then we're going to get into a little bit about this Houston police raid last month, I think it was, and that will segue us into the drug war south of our border.
I'm not sure. I think Booger and I have been talking on the sidebar here. I'm trying to see if he can get set up if he has a Bluetooth and set it up with his computer, and it will sound like he's on a mic, and it will really help with that noise issue too. Okay. So we're working on that. So
okay.
I can vouch for the fact that Booger does have blue teeth.
You know, we were talking yesterday or last week about the DNA that's being available. I think there was a company that sold it to the FBI. But we also had, I wanted to mention again, what happens when you do not submit your DNA voluntarily? Well, to the government, if you're dumb enough to send this into, okay, I apologize to any listeners that have sent their DNA and to find out about some long lost ancestry thing, but for crying out loud, you have to understand. I mean, we already were bamboozled by Facebook, right? Oh, this will be fun, it's set to friends only, I can say what I want, whatever, and just talk to my friends, and this is going to be great. We've literally sold our souls on Facebook. There's nothing they don't know about us. Our accounts are being monitored by little social justice warriors out there in cubicles in Silicon Valley who absolutely hate what we have to say. I'm still doing hard time in Facebook penitentiary, 30 days again for an 8-year-old comment that wasn't, it was merely something to which they disagreed. But here's an article from
wait, hold on. So you're saying this was an 8-year-old comment?
It was an 8-year-old comment. Yeah. And I
mentioned. Yeah. So that's, hold on a second now.
Sorry.
Lawyer wants to take it to the next level. Greg's not ready.
All right.
So do you think by chance, if your comment was a fully grown up comment and not just an 8-year-old, that this would have been left alone? If it was adult enough to stand on its own? You're picking on 8-year-old comments, Suzanne.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that's very social justice of you like that. To say something like that and just to an 8-year-old. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. So getting back to the point, we have an article here from the Free Thought Project, and I've got a couple things that I'm going to mention from them to them about them today. I really like this. Their Facebook page, freethoughtproject.com. They've been shut down before, and now they're back. And this is about police using mouth swab tests to check for stoned driving despite admitting that they're inaccurate. Now, we've seen some of these checkpoints where they asked subjects, I'm not even going to say citizens at this point, to voluntarily wink, wink, submit mouth swabs for DNA testing. Who in their right mind would do this? But I submit to you that, you know, many people don't have the confidence to stand up to a guy in his government issued costume, badge, and gun and say, no, I'm not going to comply.
But you don't, so in a lot of cases, you really don't, your hands are tied. I was in Tropical Smoothie yesterday with daughter number 3. And we went in there, big smiles. I got my mango, whatever thingamabob there, and she got her whatever banana, strawberry thingamabob that she got there. And we had a smile. And then comes walking in the door are 2 county police officers. And one just shouts off with a really like, hey, what's up? I turned around and there's a police officer in full uniform behaving like the 13-year-old, you know, who just walked into the girls' locker room. And I looked at him like, what in the hell is wrong with you? And he looked at me like, oh, you want to get locked up? That was the look I got back from this guy for his poor behavior in a public place. So I walk outside with my daughter. We walk over, get our car from what we would like to call the parking lot. And I looked over and I see these 2 police vehicles. They're in a no parking zone. In a fire lane. They parked in the fire lane. Well, I put daughter number 3 in the car, and what do you think Greg did? Greg went back inside and informed the police that they had inadvertently, possibly, parked in a fire lane. I had taken down their license plates, and I had actually already called it in that they had illegally parked. I took pictures and I sent that in too.
I love it.
And I just thought that they should know that the parking lot is on the other side of the building. And you could see one of the guys, he was fidgeting with his hand on his service revolver. That's how furious he was at me. I go out to the car, get in my car, start it up. They run out to their trucks. And don't you know they followed me for about like a half inch behind my vehicle all the way to the house, waiting for me to make one wrong move so they could arrest my butt.
Oh, yeah.
Now you tell me what is wrong. That's above the law. When you start doing stuff like that and you're stalking people for pointing out that you did something wrong, you're stalking them. That's about as inappropriate as can be. So Greg got back on the phone and called the internal affairs office at the police department over here. I don't know what's going to become of it. I'm guessing probably nothing, because that's how internal affairs works in most police departments.
You know, and this is going to segue into this case we're going to discuss coming out of Houston, but I'll share a story for you. There was this 2-mile loop walkway in San Martin when I used to live there, and I'd go and do my little laps out there. And as I was on the part of the track that was near the street, I see a car pulled over, and it's an elderly couple. And I mean elderly. They were probably in their 80s. And fair enough, I can see how maybe they'll get pulled over, because there does come a time, sadly, when people aren't safe to be on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But the way this whole stop was handled, it was obvious the guy was so scared his blinker was still on. And then we have our little affirmative action female SO writing up, a ticket. They're sitting there, this man and his wife. Obviously, he was very scared. And then there's, big boy standing there like a badass, feet stance, his pants tucked into his boots with his arm behind his back, like just daring anybody to mess with them. It was like a lion standing over their prey. The whole image was just pathetic. So of course I'm walking by and I can't resist. Hey, thanks for keeping me safe. I feel so much better. Woo! Boy, thank you. So when they're done with their business there, what do? They go over into the parking lot and start circling around as I'm headed up there. They weren't going to go in there otherwise.
Sure.
This was intended to intimidate me. So I'm walking up to my car, and I'm not going to be distracted and do another lap just because I'm afraid of them. And I just walked up and I saw them looking at me and then just laughing and drove off. But it was a similar attempted intimidation. Should I have said that? Maybe not. But you know what? That's not a threat to them.
Right. It's absolutely no threat at all. You think about it. I see the job of the police in the last 60 years or so morphing from protect the citizenry from what it was to monitor and let people work things out, and from even before that was call us if you need us. If something gets out of hand. That's what it's changed into, we're going to watch over you every step of the way. And when you make that one wrong move, don't you worry, we'll be there. You think about the laws that you have that take you, just from your house in the morning to where you're going to go to work. You go out the door, you've got to lock your door now, right? You used to not have to lock your door, but you got to lock your door now.
Do not let your vehicle warm up in the driveway.
Oh, you can get a ticket for it out here.
Yeah.
We'll finish this one later.
Someone's on the phone. Hey, it's almost the top of the hour. Why don't we take a quick break so everyone can refill their coffee cups, and this also gives me a shot to break the 2 hours in half, because when I go to SoundCloud, I can only upload an hour at a time. So what does everyone think about taking a quick break? Yeah,
I need another coffee, and my Keurig is slow as molasses, so I'll make that. And if I'm not on when you start, you run with it, Jeff, and I'll be right with you.
I need 26 coffees. 26 coffees is all I need. That's going to get me through the morning. I'll be good.
And then when we get back, folks, here on the Cerberus Radio Network, we're going to talk about this story in Houston.
All right. So is everyone good then? Are we all set for a break?
We are.
So you've got Waking Up Good Morning Cerberus here at the Cerberus Radio Network. We're taking a break. We'll be back with you at the top of the hour.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
grocery store just the other day. Saw my flag waving in the wind, said, throw that trash away. I said, ma'am, I am a Christian man, and I bleed American pride. That flag's gonna stay right where it is, and here's my reason why.
Prepare to attack. Prepare to attack on the count of 3. 1, 2, late. What happened? Where are they? I don't know, sir. They must have hyperjets on that thing. And what do we got on this thing? A Cuisinart? No, sir. We'll find them, catch them. Yes, sir. Prepare ship for light speed. No, light speed is too slow. Light speed too slow? Yes, we're gonna have to go right to ludicrous speed. Ludicrous speed? Sir, we've never gone that fast before. I don't know if the ship can take it. What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken? Prepare ship! Prepare ship for ludicrous speed. Fasten all seatbelts. Seal all entrances and exits. Close all shops in the mall. Cancel the free-range circus. Secure all animals in the zoo. Give me that, you petty excuse for an officer. Now hear this. Ludicrous speed! Sir, and you better buckle up.
Buckle this.
Speed! Go! What the hell was that? Spaceball 1. They've gone to plaid.
Are you as tired as we are of government going at ludicrous speed? Listen to Cerberus Radio Network as we bring you founders' solutions to the flames of tyranny.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Cerberus Radio Network. This is hour 2 of Waking Up Cerberus with your sometimes host, Gregory Carpenter, and more host, the lawyer, Suzanne Sherman, who... Thanks, Jeff. I got the go call to start up the show again here, so I already took off, folks. Sorry about that. And Suzanne Sherman, who is our lawyer on the scene, who has wandered off aimlessly to refill her coffee. Thank God, at least she has coffee. Oh my God. She's back with the coffee. Watch out, folks. The last thing you need to hear in the morning is a lawyer with 6 cups of espresso and 5 ounces of sugar. She's got it all.
No sugar, but heavy whipping cream. I love keto. And then I'm also
yes,
from my favorite national security agency. That's my favorite. So I want to remind everybody you can follow us on Facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We have a fan page, CRN. Hit that bell on YouTube. Follow us. And please, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends. Got a lot of listeners yesterday. That was really, it's fun to see the network growing. We have a SoundCloud page. So if you can't listen to us live, you can download, you can share. Please follow. You will get notifications when we have new shows. We have new talent joining us as well. I'm very, very excited. We have a website in the works. Thank you, Junk Bond. I'm looking forward to really working from a website platform and getting off of Facebook as much as possible.
I don't like to be dependent on somebody else's perspective
of
what facts are. Facts are facts, and there's no arguing, there's no debating, there's no discussing a fact. You can argue, debate, or discuss the environment around the fact, but the fact itself is what the fact itself is does not change. If I have a globe, it is a globe. If I have a rock is a rock. If I have a constitution, I have something that starts fires. That's all there is. That's what we use these things for in life. I use a rock to build a wall. I use a constitution to start my fire. Because what? Because that's what the federal government teaches me to do. So don't argue the facts with us, because we have a lawyer here, right? So you're gonna lose on facts. If you want to talk about hypotheticals and you want to have a high level philosophical discussion on stuff, well, that's why we have Jeff. If you're tired of being serious in life and you really need to laugh, and let's talk about something like Marlboro hemorrhagic fever or Ebola, I mean, let's do it. That's why you got me.
Light conversation topics there. I was thinking when
with tea and crumpets, yes.
About the whole intimidation factor of the criminal justice system as well. Think about the scenario when you're hauled into court. It's going to be not on a voluntary basis unless you're counsel. So you're either summoned there by jury duty, notification summons, or you're summoned in there because you've been accused of a crime. What happens when you get there? You have to sit down behind the bar there. They call it the bar. Then when the judge walks into the room, you hear the bailiff, "All rise. You better stand up. You better stand up." And I want to go back, but I've had friends that have had to go to court for various reasons. They say, "Hey, do you think you could come with me?" I said, "No, you don't want me by your side, because I'll tell you what I'm going to do next time I'm in court of law." The judge comes in, "All rise." I'm going to sit there respectfully. I'm not going to say or do anything, but I will sit there respectfully.
What are you, a San Francisco 49er?
Right, exactly. And
or are you Martin Luther King?
I have been told, "Oh, you have no respect for the law." No, these people have no respect for the law. People are already on edge when they go to court. So what's going to happen if you don't stand up? They'll either ignore it. I think most of them are egotistical enough to say, point to the bailiff and say, "Have her stand up." I'll say, "I'm sorry. Why should I? Because I'm the judge." No, you're just like me. You're a lawyer. You're just a lawyer who's got a civil service job. Why should I?
So you would be held in contempt?
Yeah.
You've got to be kidding me.
A great show, but why? But if you think about it, they would literally put you in a cage for something like this, and then they call it contempt of court. No, I submit to you, you people are in contempt of liberty. Why would we have to be? Well, look at the Supreme Court. Look at the huge pedestal upon which these people sit and look down upon the minions stating their case. Well, it's the same thing. And these smaller courts too, these judges, the bench is always the place that is looking down on the rest of us. Think about that a little bit.
That's actually, so that really takes a lot of the air out of the argument about having to remove the DUI checkpoints from the immigrant locations because they're scared of the police. Because everybody's scared of the police in the legal system.
I think they are. I really do.
Is it just because you're an immigrant that you're more scared?
I think this applies to everybody. I think the intimidation factor is how they keep people under control. Here's another great story of law enforcement. And again, I hate doing this. We always seem to have this disclaimer. Well, I'm not racist, or I'm not anti-cop, but I think we know here, we all call balls and strikes as we see them. And I don't know if you saw this video, just to give a case of when law enforcement is really doing their job as the protector of us. I don't know if you saw this, Greg. I have to see if I can find it. It was this guy in New York who was in his vehicle at night. There was nobody around, and I get chills just thinking about this scenario. There was this one dude who was obviously zombied out on some sort of drug, but he was just standing there in front of the guy's vehicle. If the guy backed up slowly, the guy followed him.
Yeah, I saw that.
He tried to turn and get away, the guy would just pivot. So there was no getting around this guy.
Yeah, he was high on New York City socialism.
Right. And and everybody's commenting, just plow him down, plow him down. I thought the driver showed tremendous restraint. He was on talking into his phone the whole time, and he literally could not escape unless he had gotten really aggressive, and you don't know what the person would have done.
Right.
When the cops showed up, without even, really thinking about it, the police officer put himself between this individual and the vehicle.
Mhm.
That's the image of the police officers I grew up with. And yes, they're still out there. We know that. Okay. We don't need to talk about that. That's what we expect from people. We don't need to say, look how heroic these guys are. That's your job. Here's what's not your job. Well, I guess you could say he's just doing his job. That's the problem. Also from the Free Thought Project. This is kind of a Free Thought Project day today. I've got a lot of cool stuff. The Houston stuff is actually from them, and also an ABC article. An 11-year-old boy is visited by police after the neighbors reported him for selling hot chocolate. When I say tyranny is a problem, I don't mean just from Washington, D.C. This is systemic. It's symptomatic.
What the hell is wrong with people?
Yes.
I mean,
it's symptomatic.
What they didn't have the kid didn't have a permit to sell hot chocolate. Is that what it is?
That's right. Castle.
Oh, you got him.
This is in Jeff's state of Pennsylvania. And in 2018 was the year of the snitches as neighbors turned in fellow neighbors to authority. We've become a society of brown shirts, just turning each other in. This see something, say something society is the wet dream of the authoritarian. And as a result, this is the article. And as a recent case of a boy selling hot chocolate, it shows no sign of slowing. See, out here in Utah, they actually had to legislate to protect kids selling lemonade. So I actually saw kids selling lemonade and cookies on my street or down in town on the way up to my road. I stopped and bought lemonade and a cookie I didn't need. I ended up giving it to my chickens. But you want to support your community. You want to teach kids that, yes, if you put out the effort, you're going to be rewarded. If you have a product others think valuable, or even if they don't want to show you the benefit of being entrepreneurial. But no, one would think that in the ostensible land of the free, the article says, a little boy selling hot chocolate to willing customers to warm them up on a winter's day would never be an issue over which people would call the police. Ha! Andrew Donaldson of Castle Shannon received a hefty dose of the see something, say something state earlier this month when his hot chocolate sales landed him in the crosshairs of state police or state-dependent, police state-dependent neighbors. That's so anathema to me, I can't even say it. A lot of times I make over $50, and I do pretty good, Andrew said, who has sold hot chocolate outside his home on multiple occasions without incident. I was kind of bored, so I was like, I can just go out and do something. So I came out and sold hot cocoa. Imagine that. This kid could have been sitting inside on his butt playing video games. He could have been doing drugs or drinking or getting into trouble or committing acts of vandalism.
Being an entrepreneur.
He decided to do something positive by offering a product that consenting adults found they had a reason to purchase. And after becoming tired of wasting time not doing anything, he grabbed his supplies, a table, and went to sell some hot chocolate. Just as soon as he set up his stand, he found himself being questioned by the police. They asked if I was by myself. I said, no, the babysitter is in the house. 2 officers told his parents that a neighbor called police because he was outside in the cold selling hot chocolate, where allegedly concerned about the temperatures. Apparently, the neighbors were too busy to visit him themselves, so they had armed agents of the state do it for them. When they showed up, they did something pretty awesome. Instead of shutting him down, and this is where I love this story, they became customers.
Yes.
This kid was lucky. We've seen instances where they are shut down. We've seen instances where people feeding the homeless are threatened with arrest. The officers confirmed he was fine. He offered them each a cup of hot chocolate on the house, but they paid him anyway. They paid even though he insisted it was free, so I thought it was really nice of them. Whoever called the cops on him are the real MVPs, because we learned that the local police were really friendly. This is an example of when things turn out great, but it is also an example, again, of this systemic, tyrannical mindset we have of neighbors turning in neighbors. If they were concerned about this kid, how about going out and saying, hey, I'd like to buy some hot chocolate from you. By the way, are you warm enough? Do you need a jacket? Is everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Hey, let me get a hot chocolate for my wife too while I'm out here. There are ways to handle this, but calling.
Sorry about that. There's really two important things going on here. One is that the child is like so many other kids that have lemonade stands or Kool-Aid stands, things like that used to be very prevalent when I was a child growing up. They're taught not to be entrepreneurs. They're taught that they have to comply. They have to get themselves a job. They have to fit in with everybody else, and they are not allowed to be creative to build their own business. Think about it this way. You can get, what, $200,000, $300,000 in student loans, but if you wanted to borrow some money, how hard is it to borrow some money to start your own business? It's much more difficult, much more difficult. It's almost a nightmare when you can go and get student loan money at the drop of a hat. You have to pretty much mortgage your family, your firstborn, and all of your farm animals and domestic animals just to get money to start a business if you don't have it and you want to do it. Now, is that completely opposite of where, even the Teddy Roosevelt concept of rugged individualism that he called out 100 and something years ago? That's completely gone. You've become the subservient follower, whether you know it, whether you like it or not. If you're not your own boss, you are the follower. And even if you are your own boss, you have to follow a lot of rules that are set up by the feds and by the states so that you do comply with what they say. But at least you have a bit of autonomy there if you have your own business. The second thing that's important here is, think about this, is people are taught from propaganda that they receive all the time because we're in a state of emergency. We're consistently in a state of emergency. We have to watch out for what? We have to watch out for the terrorists. They're out there. Oh my God.
Setting lemonade stands posing as kids.
I saw a terrorist come down my street just the other day with a baby carriage. Don't you know they gave that kid a bottle with milk in it? OMG. I can't believe it. No, how many folks? We got 30 million now and counting legal people here, about 360 with illegals. How many terrorist activities have happened in the third most populous, I'll call it, union in the world?
Let's see. We had Waco. We had Ruby Ridge. We had.
Now, I'm not talking about federal government-induced terrorist activities.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were just concerned about terrorism as it was. Okay. Well,
in the last 100 years, how many terrorist activities have you had? It's ridiculous. It's mind-bogglingly few as compared to if you go to France. France, we've had one there every few months now, right? And the population of France, is that even close to the United States? No, you can't compare the populations of the U.S. and the populations of any of the European nations, especially on how you run a government or economics or anything like that, because the numbers are so vastly different. The population is much more diverse here, much different. And the things that we should consider here are much different, which is why when you look at these United States, or I should say this United State, that'd be the proper way to say it, I guess.
Of America with a K.
After Lincoln. Yeah, after Lincoln. We should date everything PL, right? Post-Lincoln.
Well, that's what I've said. We've had the Jeffersonian version of America and then the Hamiltonian, Lincolnian version. I think what we might want to do, because we've got the gangs all here. It sounds like Booger's tech issues have been resolved. And
Hopefully.
we've got 40 minutes left, and we had a fascinating conversation last night about the drug war, the implications that the drug war has, the problems it's caused in Latin and Central America. And because Booger's available, you're here today, I'm going to put my feet up, enjoy my coffee, and listen to you two share your stories about what we're doing down in Latin America. By the way, if anybody's listening now that missed the show we had when Booger and Junk Bond talked about Venezuela and our actions down there, activities down there that I'm sure you've not heard of on other sources before, go back and find that show. I'm not sure what the date is. Maybe Jeff can message it to me and we can remind listeners. So I'm going to turn it over to you two and work your magic, because this is some stuff that people aren't going to hear elsewhere.
Okay. Hey, Booger, I'm going to let you start off because I still have not had a chance to get my coffee yet, because Suzanne got her coffee before, and I, like a good boy, did the crossover, and I've been blabbing way too much this time. So I'll let you kick it off here in your discussions.
Okay, gotcha, brother. Hey, it's funny. As I've been texting back and forth with friends, talking to them on this issue with Trump and the wall, it is just remarkable that the same excuse for taking wrong action is what they've been throwing out that the DEA agents, when I was supporting them in Bolivia, would throw out. Same thing in Colombia. They throw it out. We have to do something. And I believe that phrase has been used in a feeble attempt to justify so many totally wrong actions taken by our government and people that are in our government. It is utterly incredible.
You know what? But the funny thing is, we never hear we have to do something about this astronomical debt, which I believe is our biggest security threat. And with that, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, it's for example, this is remarkable. And actually, I wanted to get on before I brought this stuff up and make sure that if someone said, "Oh, you're bringing that," you're claiming you were there, you're claiming you saw that, but we want proof. Anytime you say something like, yes, everybody that was on a bus was being grabbed and detained for extended time periods over 30 days just because they were on a bus that cocaine was found on. And they even had women giving birth in prison to their babies. Okay. And you'll say, no way, that's impossible. Well, there was a law that the U.S. pushed down Bolivia's throat in July of 1988. And the law was Law 1008. Mm-hmm. And you go to Article 74 of Law 1008 that we shoved down Bolivia's throat. And it says someone being detained, not arrested, detained, okay, cannot leave the prison even in the case of a hospital emergency. Mm-hmm. They can only be treated in the local, in the infirmary of that prison, which usually had a doctor there roughly about 1 to 2 hours a day. And the rest of the time they were attended by paramedics. No medicine was provided. If it was donated. So whenever I bring up things like that, I can actually cite in the law that we pushed in there how they were allowed to do it by their law. Okay, so keep this in mind.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing that when you think of it in this term, in legal terms, we actually gave ourselves the full right to manipulate and abuse every country in Latin America back with the Monroe Doctrine. We told everybody to stay out, that we were going to be the big brother. And what kind of a big brother have we been to all these countries? I can look through the history of somebody posted from the MAME University of information that's kind of interesting but not always accurate. And I went back and took a look and got a total. We've actually sponsored a coup, at least one, in almost every Latin American country. If people don't remember the Banana Wars, this is the thing that Major General Smedley Butler talked about when he said war's a racket. He said he told people that he was used as a hitman by the government. He was a hitman for U.S. corporations to go out and secure the facilities, the resources, and bring back the money. That's why we used
Yes.
the Marines in the Banana Wars, and then it evolved, and of course, it went downhill from there. We started putting in dictators, and then we didn't like those dictators, so we would have them executed, or they would quote lose an election or something like that. Our intervention in Latin America goes back into the early 1800s, folks. You got to understand, we were going to be the biggest, carrying country out here in the Western Hemisphere.
Hey,
We
John,
were
are you saying that we've meddled in the elections of other sovereign nations?
We've only identified that the CIA, just the CIA, has, because this is on declassified documentation. You can get it from the National Security Archives and verify it yourself if you like. 85 elections the CIA has meddled in that they've acknowledged. Now, they're not going to tell us about the ones that they meddled in that might be more important, because they didn't tell us about all the rest of them that I would believe. And
Like
here you go. You got me on. Oh boy, you got me on the. So, being a former NSA employee, I have to say the disclaimer that everything I talk about here is not based on any knowledge that I gleaned from the National Security Agency or the Central Security Service. Most of you don't know that we do have a Central Security Service, but we do. And that everything I come up with here are my own ideas and thoughts gleaned from information that I have collected on my own from open source information. Now, the CIA alone, 85 that they acknowledge. Now, you're not talking about what other elections the FBI might have meddled in, the NSA, the Central Security Service. Oh, that's right. Don't forget, we've got one of them. And any other agency, the DEA. You have no idea how active the DEA is in activities south of the border. Those guys are everywhere, aren't they, Booger?
Oh, yes. And what is ironic on this is we actually create narcos. And I'll give you a scenario that is replayed over and over. We down there, well, whenever the DEA, before the DEA was actually pushed out, okay, they were actually finally pushed out when Bolivia finally got sick and tired of a lot of the stuff that was going on when they got Morales in power in Bolivia. But what would commonly happen down there is buses were used as a form of cargo delivery. Someone would put a duffel bag on the bus to have it sent from one place to the other. The mail system just is, for all practical purposes, non-existent out in the other areas. And the Humo which was part of the narcotics police that the DEA forced Bolivia to develop, they would just stop buses, have routine roadblocks all over the place, search with no probable cause, and they would search houses with no search warrants whatsoever. Let's say a package of cocaine is found underneath the bus. Everybody on that bus gets arrested. I'm talking minors, old people, pregnant women, everybody, is arrested and detained. And a lot of times they were put in a prison right outside of Chimere where I was working. And I would go out there and talk to the people on occasion, and actually got to know people in the town of Chimere there before any of their family was arrested, and got to hear the story. They would arrest them, hold them, till more or less they got tired of holding them or found some drummed up charges to put to tag on them. And then these people, when they would finally get out of jail, totally innocent, the vast majority, and the person that put the package of cocaine on the bus or underneath the bus probably was not even on the bus. So you can see that there was no link whatsoever legally that could empower the police, actually by, I guess you'd say, well, they were empowered by law 1008. But according to the Bolivian constitution, the police did not have the power to do this. Now, these people, while they're in jail, they lose their job. Of course, they're not going to work for 30 days or more. Their house gets broken into. All other possessions get stolen. They get out of jail. They've got kids they've got to feed who, if they were lucky, they managed to get them out of jail and actually have some family to look after them. And there's only one place this guy can go now to get a sign-on bonus and start working right away to feed his family, the narcos. So if the guy had a job as a welder, a mechanic, whatever, he lost that job. And good chance he's not going to get it back. And where can he go now to feed his family? The narcos and coke elites out at some drug lab in the jungle. Just, it's remarkable. That's a perfect example of our hypocrisy down there.
It's amazing too, because we have created the environment and fostered the destruction of numerous governments down there for such a long time. It actually, when you look at the breadth and depth of our involvement, it actually takes your breath away. Most of the leaders of these countries, even the ones that we say that we're not friends with, okay, folks, they're receiving a stipend from the State Department, or they're receiving funds from some other source in our government. We've been buying them off for years. Anybody think for a second that we weren't paying off Kim Jong-il back when he was, going, I don't have any weapons of mass destruction. How many times I got to tell you, Hans? That guy, that lunatic, all right, he wasn't a lunatic. The fact is that the guy worked out his part of the deal pretty doggone well and was getting lots of money from our government. We were paying him off. And the whole time that we said that we didn't have any diplomatic relations with him, guess what? We did. That just came out in the news recently that everybody knows about, but the information has been there for years. That's a special envoy. It's been all declassified, that we had special envoys for years going to North Korea to try to work out our differences.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, sir.
Didn't his dad, every couple years, there'd be some sort of crisis? He was going to do something, and then all of a sudden we'd go in and we'd give them some money, and he'd be quiet for a couple more years. Then all of a sudden, it was another crisis, and we'd go and give him some money. I think his son learned very well, and that all you have to do is create a little crisis, and the American idiots will come in and give you billions of dollars.
So his dad, he was just as bad. And this is exactly what they learned. It is the model that had been used over and over again. We did this with China, and we did this with Iran. We even did it with the Russians. Up until a couple of years ago, we were sending hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to Russia. Now we do it quietly, but we're still sending hundreds of millions of dollars to them every single year. And why are we doing that, folks? Think about it. Because we want everybody on the take. If everybody is receiving hush money from you, then nobody is going to challenge you. Why do you think no one challenges the U.S. ever? Who's challenged us? There have been passive attempts to challenge us. Saddam in 2000 was going off of the petrodollar, the U.S. dollar for oil system, and we straightened him out. Muammar Gaddafi said that he was going to establish an African gold standard for money to be used for oil trade. And by 2006, we had taken care of him. He was gone. Who's next?
Yeah, it's it's incredible, and the amount of money that we're spending down there in this insane drug war. When really and truly, as I found out, this was years later, jumping from Bolivia to Colombia, probably circa about 2003. We are down there working, and I had a very good battalion commander. The guy was, I mean, he was very religious and didn't really BS anybody. And one time I run onto him, and he was just, you could tell he was very disturbed. And I asked him, "Hey, sir, what's up? You look disturbed." He turns to me, and I was already into conspiracies at that time period. He turned to me and he said, "Booger, you're right." And I said, "Well, about what?" He said, "We can stop this drug war any time we want." And I said, "Really? Do tell." We have these guys located the vast majority of the time, every one of them. He said, we're listening to all their cell phone conversations, no matter how many little cutouts they use. We know who their guys are that are actually relaying their information. He said, we even know who their wives are having affairs with. We may lose one for a day or two, and we grab him again. And we will not give this information to the Colombians. And I want you to just look how incredible that bit of information is, knowing how we're forcing those people down there to violate human rights, tear their country apart with all the corruption that is brought on whenever you have an illegal substance that's netting billions each year being moved around through the country. It is going to corrupt every corner of that country. Politics, the judicial, the police, the press, everything gets corrupted with that amount of money. We could stop it, but we didn't. That should just get you thinking. And Greg, I'm sure you can expound that. Yes, our intelligence abilities are that good.
Yeah, they sure are. As a matter of fact, we're the ones, we put the money in play that forces people into those situations where they're compromising themselves and compromising their families and compromising their integrity. We're the ones who actually fund that to keep everybody off balance. See, if we have a government that's off balance, then they're not able to organize at a level that would actually challenge us economically in this hemisphere. We can still control all the banana interests in Central and South America. Why? Well, because we have the military muscle, and they don't have a government that is able to support any company in developing what they have, or even purchasing back the rights of the land where everything's made. This is something that should scare the heck out of everybody. The whole, I'm Chiquita banana thing, that grew out of the banana wars. Our monopoly is, I would say, nearly complete. As a matter of fact, if you think about what we did in Hawaii when we called for a, quote, emergency out there, and President McKinley sent the Marines storming in there to take over and take the sovereignty away from the Hawaiians. They never wanted us in the first place. We went there, we invaded. This is imperialism 101. This is not the first time we've done this. There was even discussion back during the Spanish-American War, if you want to go that far back. Puerto Ricans, the Cubans, they wanted annexation. They wanted to be part of the states. Go figure. But the Filipinos didn't. And there was all this discussion in Congress if we were going to have one group get annexed or the other group get annexed. Well, the Filipinos didn't want it. They were fighting us the whole time, but we still made them, part of a colonial territory of the United States until I think it was like 38 or something like that. And then of course, MacArthur had to go back, right? After he got thrown out, he had to go back because that's where all the Japanese gold was. So they had to go recover that.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason we used and abused the Philippines in the way we did. And we kept bases there for obviously ballistic missile launch detection and things like that, cruise missile launch detection. But we use other people. That's who we are. And if you really want to get down to brass tacks about it, we are the bully on the block. And I really hate to say that, because when I was growing up, I had this epiphany, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, we're the best, we're awesome, we're cool. Because I drank the Kool-Aid. Before I started making Kool-Aid for the government folks, I drank that Kool-Aid too. I really did. And then one day I had this epiphany. And I said to myself, Junk Bond, what if we're not the good guys? What if the Russians are the good guys and we're actually the bad guys? Have you ever thought of that? Now, intellectually, I was at the state where I was actually able to look at that problem set and think about it and then start to explore it. If I had thought about that when I was any younger, I would have outright rejected it, just simply because I wasn't at a maturity level to think of it like that. It takes a lot, and I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else. Don't get me wrong, okay? Don't go off on that like, man, Junk Bond's biased, he's racist, this and that. Please shut up. Don't give me that garbage. I grew up and I learned something. That's what I'm sharing today. That's all it is that I'm sharing. I learned that we may not always be the good guy. It's not always like it is in a fairy tale. It doesn't always have a happy ending. You know what? Grow up, get over it. I think that. Go ahead. I'll let you in, Suzanne.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, join or die once had an entirely different connotation, didn't it? It was a message of liberty and independence, but now it's become, I think it was Baby Bush, you're either with us or you're against us. And Mitt for Brains, when he was running for president, he actually was saying in an interview, we have got to be in these places before trouble starts, meaning we have to be the global police. Meanwhile, we scream like a bunch of school children when other countries don't respect our borders. We have an absolute statesman of a politician who had the temerity to stand before Congress and talk about the golden rule and treating other sovereign nations the way we want to be treated. Imagine what would have happened, how different things would have been had the neocons not slammed the door on a true statement, Dr. Ron Paul. They're screaming for limited government, fiscal responsibility. He raises his hand and says, hey, how about me? And they said, no, he's crazy. He's talking fiscal responsibility, limited government. He's an isolationist. No, he's a non-interventionist. There's a completely different scenario, but nobody really understands that word. Interestingly enough, a decentralized form of government, which we were intended to have, would never be, first of all, disrupting the societies in the areas that you mentioned and the way they're doing, which is absolutely egregious. Nor would we be the police of the entire world, because we wouldn't have the financial ability to do so. We would not be in this mess had the government not completely thrown off its constitutional restraints. Today marks the 77th anniversary of the signing of a certain executive order. I'm wondering if you know which one it might be, Junk Bond. It had to do with the internment of a certain ethnic profile with no due process, no accusation that they had committed a crime, but it was a national emergency. The Supreme Court upheld this measure in a case called Korematsu. On this day in 1942, U.S. authorities began locking up Americans, not Japanese Americans, Americans, in concentration camps. I must have constitution camps. Supreme Court upheld it. It must have been constitutional.
It has to be, because the Supreme Court said so. There was 100 and something thousand people, weren't there?
And they were no help when it came to the Fugitive Slave Acts either, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
No.
You know, I had...
Yeah, that was so... Yeah, that was EO 9066, which is... I did a lot of research on this one, actually. And that led me to the point where I learned that there is another executive order that locked up all of the Germans. They were Americans of German descent, and they were locked up where? They were put on Ellis Island, of all places. This is where we're supposed to welcome people into these hither United States with open arms, right? We had that big old torch out there with the green woman and everything like that. And we're supposed to welcome people in, and you pass through Liberty Island and you get to Ellis Island and you go sign in because you're now free. Well, that's where they locked up all the Americans of German descent. And as a matter of fact, they didn't let them out of the prison there until 1948. 3 years after the conclusion of World War II was when they finally let the American citizens who've done absolutely nothing wrong other than the fact that they were of German descent. Disgusting.
You never hear about that story.
Oh, I got a bunch.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff you never hear about. You know, it's like...
That was Presidential Proclamation 2526, by the way, just in case you were curious.
Wow.
And they locked them up during World War I, too. As a matter of fact, with the Italians, American of Italian descent, they were locked up, too. Now, during World War I, they were put in, most of them were put in hotels and stuff like that, which was a little bit better. Others went straight to prison, which was just a horrible situation. But, yeah, there was, gosh, I don't even remember how many people they locked up, but most of them were locked up on Ellis Island. A sad, sad state of affairs for us to do something like that to our own citizens.
Well, we stab just about everybody I know. You know, you get down just stabbing in the back of our own citizens and then stabbing everybody in the back in Latin America. It seems to be
it's the American way, right?
Yeah. It's, for example, initially everybody remembers the war against Pablo Escobar.
Yep.
We would not, I'll tell you what, it would have taken a lot longer if we would have even won it, if we did not get support from the Pepes, you know, the people exploited by Pablo Escobar. Mm-hmm. Those people were, I mean, very valuable to the cause. They helped to shrink Pablo's world. Slowly but surely, the hangouts he could go to got blown up. The people that he could go to for help just started disappearing. And it was a combination of the Pepes, and Cali also had very big interest in seeing Pablo go down because he was a bloody psychopath that was bringing way too much attention internationally to the drug trade. So at that point in time, we're like, hey, let's use both of these groups. They're kind of our friends now. And then as soon as we got Pablo, we go after Cali. The Pepes are still helping. And now, as you can imagine, these organizations, they also end up locking horns with the FARC and the ELN in Colombia because they're taking on the drug lords that are actually paying them. So now they get in a blood feud with the FARC. And okay, we dismantle. We didn't get rid of the Cali drug cartel, and we didn't get rid of the Medellin. We dismantled them into smaller groups. And what ends up happening now is the Pepes now become the AUC of Colombia, or really they were given all different names, right-wing death squads, which really and truly, did they fall into that category? Well, I think we do sometimes as well.
We do.
Yeah, we do. Okay. And what it boiled down
We
to.
came,
Huh?
we saw, he died, and then cackling laughter.
Yes.
Oh my-
Okay.
Who but a sociopath will lie about, will laugh, I'm sorry, would laugh about the murder of a sovereign leader, or anybody else for that matter that they're responsible for killing, to find that's something worthy of uproarious laughter. I'm going to get into on the next show we do an article about how these positions of power attract sociopaths. I found a really good article. So on the next show we do, I'm going to address that. But go ahead, Booger. We're going to wrap up the show pretty soon.
Okay.
Hey, Booger, let me jump just real quick here, just for
Yes.
a second, in case people have forgotten. I want you to remember that the CIA was a key component in bringing drugs into this country. This is before we stood up and managed the drug trade ourselves, like we're doing now. We were the ones actually running stuff in here. If you don't remember the story of Gary Webb. Remember what happened in LA and how much crack was brought into LA and how many people ended up dying. A lot of it was released and shared with the public, not all of it, of course. And I'm not talking about the stuff that's not released to the public, but the CIA played a very pivotal role in the crack epidemic of the 1980s in Los Angeles, as well as the introduction of many, many, many hallucinogenic drugs into the U.S. population back in the 60s and even the 50s. They're the ones that helped get us to where we're at with drugs today. Go ahead,
John, there was a reporter that shared this story, and he lost his career over this. I actually saw a movie about that. I don't remember his name, but isn't that the truth?
Yes, his name was Gary Webb. That's why I said, remember Gary Webb. Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry. I had to
check out
for a second. Sorry about that. Okay.
Oh, no. That's okay. That's okay. They actually made a movie, Kill the Messenger.
Yes, that's the name
It's
of
the
the
name of the movie, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about, because he talked about, there was, in the reports that he was writing, he talked about Dark Alliance, and he won a Pulitzer in '89 for another story or something. He talked about the CIA was partly responsible for bringing crack up into the States in the '80s, and he goes into the whole thing, and then the next thing we know, the dude's dead.
Yeah, he supposedly killed himself, right? 2 shots to the head.
Yeah, and I think it might have even been with his dad's revolver. Don't quote me on that, but it was something just absurd. Shot himself twice in the back of the head. Incredible. But on the state state support down there, this was in '94 when I was down there, working the Cali War, against the Cali drug cartel. And this is how I got to know so much about the Colombian civilian militias, which we later called death squads because they kept hitting the drug trade. They had a war on with the FARC, and they were being extremely effective. So we had to put them on the international terrorist list and tell them to turn their guns in. So, and I remember talking to one of these AUC or civilian militia commanders. He said, we supported you guys the whole way, and now you're stabbing me in the back. He said, I can't turn my guns in. I cannot disband my militia. We might as well go home and shoot our families before we do it, and then shoot ourselves, because the FARC and the ELN will kill us if we do not have our weapons. But they had been declared terrorists because they used car bombs and they threw bombs. Talking to him, his point of view was, is it the bomb, or do 4 wheels make it a terrorist? A terrorist act. He said, I would fire a cruise missile if I had one. I don't. So I have to drive my explosive payload with a car. And he said, we get less civilians than you do. I tell my men, do not leave the package where we have talked about if it looks like it's going to cost civilian lives. And he said, but, they say civilians get killed. Sometimes they do. And we do our best not to, but we're still terrorists. He said, I don't see the difference between explosives being sent there on wings and explosives being sent there on wheels. So
That's amazing.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing? And that's why TWA 800, when it was shot out of the air, was not considered a terrorist act. It was able to blow up on its own. Because if you shot a Stinger missile, right, like our buddy Steve Bongard said probably happened, retired FBI agent, folks, who actually did, and he conducted the ManPad investigation for the FBI for TWA 800. All right, he said they didn't rule out anything, and I'm going to tell you what, probability. And you look at all of the witness statements. How can you discredit 260 something witnesses and say that their story is full of hooky? Well, the reason you do that is because you don't want something to get out. That's why you do that, right? So, and remember also, don't let this in a microcosm like of our influence in South America distract you from anything that's important, because the reason that you don't hear about most of this stuff is because back in the 50s, the CIA infiltrated and put people into different news media. Those people were outed in 1976 during the Church Commission. But guess what? Let me ask you a question here, Booger, just because this is going to be fun. Now, when the government fails at something, do they stop, or do they just rename the program and keep going?
Oh, rename it and keep going. They'll just relabel the thing and keep it moving.
Well, we see that on the domestic front as well, renaming Common Core. Oh, we're going to get rid of Common Core. We're just going to put another label on it. James Madison, again, he's not my favorite, but he did have a quote attributed to him that essentially says that oppression and tyranny are going to come to us under the guise of a foreign enemy. We've pretty much established military supremacy over everyone on this globe. That being said, it becomes necessary to continue having us in a state of panic that something has to be done under these emergency orders, by perpetuating different wars where we don't have a tangible enemy. We have war on poverty, which is going to be expansion of government controls, more redistribution of wealth. We have the emergency, the healthcare crisis, where all of a sudden having medical insurance, which really isn't medical care, is all of a sudden a civil right, and you can quit your day job so you can do your music at night and be creative and not worry about being productive. That was
you're saying using war as a metaphor.
Yeah. So
okay, so we have a war on customs, we have a war on trade, we have a war on crime, we have a Cold War.
War on terror.
Right? We have a war on poverty, war on cancer, war on drugs, war on gangs. We have a culture war. We have a war on ideas. I think the Heritage Foundation said there's a war on graffiti, war on cars, war on want, war on need, war on Islam, right? Then there was a war on Christmas, a war on women. I can't even. I'm sorry.
Don't forget the czars that are appointed to head these wars.
Obama Safe Schools czar, by the way, I forgot his name now, but he was actually honored by NAMBLA. And as we look now, as the Gestapo is taking away our rights to freedom of association every time we turn around, and we're seeing what once used to be called a mental disorder, we're marching down this road of the peculiarities and perversions being glorified. So now what pedophilia, for instance, which was once considered absolutely taboo and should be criminal behavior. Now we're starting to see a change in how that's looked at. This whole transgender thing is being glorified. They have television shows about this stuff. The bottom line is, folks, the only way that they can completely take over is by subjecting us to becoming critical and questioning our traditional values, our being self-reliant. Imagine if we had a lifestyle where we could focus on our subsistence and where politicians wouldn't have the time to focus on how they're going to control us. On behalf of Greg Junkbong Carpenter and Booger, I want to, Greg, tell me Booger's name again. I'm so sorry.
Sander Kinsall.
Sander Kinsall. I'm so sorry.
Stick with Booger.
I want to welcome you to be becoming your role here as a regular on our network. I'm delighted to have you. And Jeff Johnson here on the Cerberus Radio Network. I want to thank you for listening to us. Have a great day.